Kahlan had spent 26 years perfecting the art of being invisible. As an Omega healer in Rahl's pack, invisibility wasn't just survival, it was the entire job description. Keep your head down, stitch wounds without asking how they happened, bow when alphas pass, agree when they speak, exist in the spaces between their violence and call it peace. She'd gotten good at it, really good. So good that she could watch pack members drag in half-dead wolves from training accidents and clean the blood without her hands shaking. So good that she could hear Rahl declare someone unworthy and nod like it made sense. So good that she'd almost convinced herself that this careful, quiet, suffocating existence was the same thing as living. Then came the worst winter in 40 years. The kind of winter where the trees cracked like bones and the wind bit through fur like teeth. The kind where prey disappeared and food stores dwindled and Rahl started making calculations about who consumed resources and who produced them. The kind where mercy became a luxury the pack could no longer afford. Or so Rahl said during the gathering, his voice carrying over the nervous crowd like a death sentence looking for a target. "We survive by being strong," he'd announced, gray eyes sweeping over his pack with the warmth of a glacier. "The weak endanger us all. Nature demands sacrifice. We will obey." Everyone had nodded. Even Kahlan had nodded, hating herself for it, because what else could an Omega do? That was 3 days ago. Now she was trudging through knee-deep snow toward the eastern border, supposedly to check the medicine cache in the old den. A simple errand, a forgettable task for a forgettable wolf. The kind of assignment that let her pretend she was useful without being noticed. She'd almost made it there when she heard the crying. High-pitched, desperate, definitely young, and absolutely, horrifyingly alone in the worst blizzard she'd seen in years. "Keep walking," her survival instinct screamed. "It's not your business. You didn't see anything. Get to the den, check the supplies, go back, stay invisible." But her feet had stopped moving, because she'd heard that kind of crying before. The sound something makes when it's been abandoned and knows it. When it understands, in whatever way a child can understand, that the world has decided it doesn't deserve to exist. Kahlan changed direction, pushing through the deeper snow, her inadequate cloak doing absolutely nothing against the wind that seemed personally offended by her existence. Her medical bag banged against her hip with each step, a reminder that she'd spent years learning to heal and had been too afraid to use it for anything that mattered. She found him huddled against an ancient pine tree, barely visible against the white landscape, except for the small pool of red in the snow where his twisted leg dragged. Richard, she knew him. Everyone knew him. Born 6 weeks ago with a hind leg that hadn't formed right, bent at an unnatural angle, the paw curled inward, useless for running or hunting, or any of the things Rahl valued. His parents had petitioned to keep him anyway, swearing they'd provide for him, that he wouldn't burden the pack. Rahl had given them until the first major storm to prove it. Apparently, this was the storm, and apparently they'd failed whatever test Rahl had set. Or maybe they'd just obeyed orders when the alpha commanded them to leave their defective pup where nature could take its course. Richard's pale fur was already crusted with ice. His breathing came in shallow gasps that fogged the air in weak little clouds. His golden eyes, too aware, too conscious for something so small, tracked her approach with the resignation of someone who'd already been taught that help doesn't come. Kahlan's medical training cataloged the damage automatically. Severe hypothermia, possible frostbite, dehydration, exhaustion, infected wound on the dragging leg, maybe 2 hours before organ failure, maybe less. Behind her, she could feel the weight of pack territory, warmth, safety, the rules she'd followed her entire life, the invisibility that had kept her alive. Ahead, through 10 miles of brutal winter, lay the Borderlands, the collection of smaller packs that took in refugees and outcasts. Packs that Rahl called weak and delusional for judging wolves by character instead of strength. Packs that might let a disabled pup and a traitorous Omega live. Might. Cara had walked past this spot earlier. Kahlan had seen her tracks in the snow, seen where the warrior had paused, seen where she'd deliberately kept walking. Even fierce, honorable Cara had chosen obedience over mercy. Zedd, the ancient advisor, had probably whispered his usual justification. Nature's way, cruel to prolong suffering, the needs of the many. Every pack member who'd passed this tree had made the same calculation and reached the same conclusion. Not my problem, not worth the risk, better him than me. Kahlan knelt in the snow, feeling the cold soak through immediately. Richard's eyes met hers, terrified, resigned, already saying goodbye. "I won't leave you," Kahlan whispered, and felt her entire carefully invisible life shatter like ice. She pulled off her cloak and wrapped it around his tiny, shaking body. 10 miles to the Borderlands. 10 miles through a storm that was supposed to kill him anyway. 10 miles carrying a pup that Rahl had declared worthless. 10 miles to prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is care. Kahlan lifted Richard against her chest, feeling his heartbeat flutter like a trapped bird, and turned her back on everything she'd ever known. Some things, it turned out, were worth freezing for. The blood on Kahlan's hands was still warm when Rahl walked past her treatment room without bothering to look inside. That was how it worked in his pack. Alphas inflicted damage, Omegas cleaned it up, and everyone pretended this was the natural order of things. "Hold still," Kahlan murmured to the young male on her table. His ribs badly bruised from what Cara had cheerfully called endurance conditioning, which was pack speak for getting thrown against trees until you either learned to take it or stopped getting up. This one had learned, barely. "Will I be able to train tomorrow?" he asked, voice tight with pain. "You should rest for 3 days." But the Alpha said, "I know what the Alpha said." Kahlan pressed the comfrey poultice against his ribs with practiced efficiency. "You'll train tomorrow. You'll just hurt more." He nodded like this made perfect sense, because in Rahl's pack, it did. Pain was weakness leaving the body. Injury was a lesson. Death was nature's way of identifying those who didn't deserve to survive. Kahlan had heard these philosophies so many times they'd stopped sounding like madness and started sounding like inevitability. She'd been patching up Rahl's lessons for 8 years now. 8 years of setting bones that had been deliberately broken to build resilience. 8 years of treating frostbite from wolves forced to sleep outside to toughen them up. 8 years of stitching wounds that came from dominance training that looked remarkably similar to sanctioned violence. And 8 years of keeping her mouth shut about it, because Omegas who questioned Alphas tended to become object lessons themselves. Through the doorway, she could see Cara running drills in the training yard, her muscular frame moving with lethal grace as she demonstrated a takedown that left her sparring partner gasping in the snow. Cara was Rahl's favorite enforcer, the one who carried out his vision of strength with ruthless efficiency. She was also, Kahlan had noticed, very careful never to meet anyone's eyes after training sessions ended, as if not seeing the damage meant she wasn't responsible for it. Zedd stood at the yard's edge, gray muzzle lifted in approval, occasionally offering commentary on form and technique. The pack's eldest advisor, keeper of traditions, the wolf who could justify anything by invoking the old ways, or pack survival, or Kahlan's personal favorite, necessary sacrifice. He had an ancient wisdom for every cruelty, a proverb for every abandoned pup, a philosophical framework that made barbarity sound like enlightenment. All done, Kahlan told her patient, helping him sit up carefully. Try not to get thrown into any more trees for a few days. I'll try. He limped out, probably heading straight back to training, because fear of Rahl was always stronger than pain. Kahlan was cleaning blood off her work table when the memory hit her, sharp and unwanted, the way trauma always arrived. 6 weeks ago, Richard's mother, Elena, howling in the birthing den, not from pain, but from horror. The small pale pup emerging with his rear leg twisted wrong, the bones formed at angles that would never support weight properly. The absolute silence that fell over the attending wolves when they saw it. Rahl had arrived within minutes, as if he'd sensed the weakness manifesting in his territory. He'd looked at the newborn for perhaps 10 seconds, just long enough to catalog the defect, before delivering his verdict. It won't survive anyway. Better to acknowledge that now than waste resources pretending otherwise. Elena had begged. Richard's father, Marcus, had pleaded, promising they'd provide everything, that their pup wouldn't burden anyone. Rahl had listened with the patience of someone who'd already made his decision and was simply allowing them to exhaust themselves. You have until winter, he'd finally said. Prove he can contribute, or nature takes its course. That's more mercy than most packs would show. Mercy. Rahl used that word the way other wolves used it for quick kills, something that ended suffering fast, not something that prevented suffering in the first place. Kahlan had watched them carry. Richard Home had seen Elena's desperate hope, warring with growing dread, had known, even then, how this would end. Because she'd seen it before. Pups born wrong, or injured young, or just too small to keep up. Rahl gave them all the same chance to prove themselves, which really meant he gave their families time to accept the inevitable before he enforced it. The pack called it natural selection. Kahlan called it eugenics with better marketing. She'd treated 5 training accidents that week alone. She'd reset a dislocated shoulder from a dominance challenge that was really just bullying with Rahl's approval. She'd cleaned infected wounds from wolves who'd been denied medical care until they could demonstrate their commitment to healing. Every injury had an excuse. Every cruelty had a justification. Every death had been regrettable but necessary. And Kahlan had nodded through all of it, because that's what Omegas did. Nod, agree, survive by being too useful to dispose of and too quiet to notice. The sun was setting when she overheard them, Rahl's voice carrying from his den, where Elena and Marcus stood with their heads bowed in submission. The storm arrives tomorrow, Rahl was saying, his tone almost gentle. You know what must be done. Please, Elena's voice cracked. Just a few more weeks. He's getting stronger, learning to compensate. He's a drain on resources we can't afford. You've had your time to accept this. Rahl's gentleness hardened into something colder. Take him to the eastern border before the storm fully hits. Leave him by the old pine. Nature will be kinder than we would be. Kahlan's hands froze in the medical supplies she'd been organizing. We can't, Marcus started. You can, and you will. Because you understand that the pack's survival requires difficult choices. Because you're loyal wolves who put the many before the one. Because the alternative is that I question your own commitment to pack law, and we both know where that leads. Silence. The kind that meant surrender. Yes, Alpha, Elena whispered. Good. Do it tomorrow afternoon. I want this resolved before the storm peaks. Kahlan stood in her treatment room, listening to Richard's parents walk away with their footsteps heavy as graves, and felt something crack inside her chest. She'd spent 8 years telling herself the system was broken. That if she could just explain things better, heal more efficiently, prove that different didn't mean worthless, eventually things would change. But listening to Rahl order a pup's execution with the same casual authority he used for meal schedules, she finally understood. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly as designed. And she'd been helping it work by staying quiet, by patching up its victims, by surviving instead of resisting. Kahlan looked at her hands, steady, skilled, stained with blood from wounds she'd helped make bearable enough for wolves to return to the violence that caused them. Tomorrow afternoon, Elena and Marcus would take their son into the snow and leave him to die. Tomorrow night, Rahl would go to sleep satisfied that his pack remained strong and pure. Tomorrow, everyone would agree it had been necessary. Unless someone finally decided necessary and right weren't the same thing. Kahlan's hands started shaking, but for the first time in 8 years, it wasn't from fear. It was from rage. Kahlan followed them at a distance, her medical bag slung over her shoulder like she had some legitimate reason to be heading toward the eastern border in the middle of an approaching blizzard. Elena and Marcus walked slowly, Marcus carrying Richard against his chest, the small, pale pup's twisted leg dangling uselessly. Even from 50 yards back, Kahlan could hear Elena's quiet sobbing, the kind that came from a grief so profound it had worn through all the loud emotions and left only this hollow, broken sound. They reached the old pine just as the wind picked up, snow beginning to fall in earnest. Kahlan pressed herself behind a cluster of frost-covered brambles, watching through the increasing white. Marcus set Richard down gently in the snow, his hands lingering on his son's small body like he was memorizing the feel of him. Elena collapsed beside the pup, pulling him close one last time, her whole body shaking with sobs she was clearly trying to muffle. "I'm sorry," she kept whispering into Richard's pale fur. "I'm so sorry, my baby. I'm so sorry." Richard, 5 years old and already too familiar with rejection, didn't cry. He just pressed closer to his mother, his golden eyes wide and confused. "Mama, are we going home soon? I'm cold." "You'll be," Elena's voice broke. "You'll be warm soon, sweetheart. I promise." It was the kind of lie parents told children to make death easier, and it made Kahlan's stomach turn. Marcus pulled Elena away, his own face wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "We have to go. We can't. Elena, we have to go." No, please." Elena reached back toward Richard, but Marcus held her firm. "We have no choice. You know what he'll do to us. To our other pups. Elena, we have no choice." They left, Elena looking back every few steps, until Marcus finally just picked her up and carried her, her anguished wails fading into the storm's howl. Richard sat alone by the tree, watching his parents disappear. Then, finally, he started to cry. Not the loud, demanding cry of a child expecting comfort, but the quiet, hopeless sound of something that had learned no one was coming. Kahlan stepped out from behind the brambles. She made it 3 steps before a hand clamped on her shoulder, spinning her around with enough force to make her stumble. Cara stood there, snow already collecting on her dark fur, her expression carved from granite. "Don't! Let go of me! Kahlan, don't do this. He'll die anyway. His leg, the cold, he won't survive the winter, even if you take him. You'll just drag it out, make it worse for everyone. Worse than freezing to death alone? Worse than getting yourself exiled or killed for treason." Cara's grip tightened. "I saw you following them. I know what you're thinking. And I'm telling you as someone who doesn't want to watch another wolf die, go back to the den. Or what? You'll drag me back? Add me to your list of training casualties?" Something flickered in Cara's eyes, pain, maybe, or shame, but her voice stayed hard. "If I have to, Rahl's law is clear. That pup was judged and sentenced. Interfering means you're declaring yourself above pack law. Pack law is murder dressed up in philosophy. Pack law is survival." But Cara's hand loosened slightly on Kahlan's shoulder. "You're Omega. You're useful. Don't throw that away on a pup who's already dead." "He's not dead yet. He will be by morning. Nature's already decided. Rahl decided. There's a difference." Cara released her, stepping back with an expression Kahlan had never seen on the warrior's face before, something that looked almost like pleading. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you make me choose between you and my alpha." "Then I guess you'll have to hurt me." Kahlan pushed past her, ignoring Cara's frustrated growl, and headed toward the tree where Richard still sat, crying quietly into the gathering storm. "You'll regret this." The voice came from behind another tree, Zedd, materializing from the shadows with his gray muzzle lifted in what might have been concern or might have been calculation. Hard to tell with him. "Probably," Kahlan said without stopping. "Rahl doesn't tolerate dissent. You know this. He'll make an example of you. Public punishment at best, exile at worst. Or he'll simply have Cara kill you for treason and call it justice." Zedd moved to block her path, his ancient eyes searching her face. "Is this really worth your life? Is staying alive worth watching children freeze to death?" "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is. You're being emotional, irrational. You're an Omega. Survival through submission is literally coded into your designation. This goes against everything you are." "Maybe everything I am is wrong." Zedd's expression hardened. "Save him and you doom yourself." "He can't be fixed, Kahlan. His leg will never work properly. He'll never hunt, never fight, never contribute the way the pack needs. You'll sacrifice everything for a wolf who has no future. He has today. That's more of a future than he'll have if I walk away. And tomorrow, next week, when you're both starving because no pack will take you in, when Rahl sends hunters after you, when you're dying of exposure in some frozen wasteland with a crippled pup you can't feed, then at least I'll die knowing I tried. That's not wisdom. That's suicide with delusions of nobility." Kahlan looked at the ancient advisor, this wolf who could justify anything, who'd watched generations of pups die and called it tradition. "You know what I think. Zedd, I think you tell yourself these things so you can sleep at night. I think you've been complicit in so much cruelty for so long that the only way you can live with yourself is by pretending it's all inevitable, natural, beyond anyone's control. Zedd's ears flattened. Watch your tongue, Omega. Or what? You'll report me? I'm already committing treason. She stepped around him. Get out of my way. He did, surprisingly, but his voice followed her. You're condemning yourself for nothing. He's just one pup. He's not nothing to me. She reached Richard as the snow began falling harder. The small pup looked up at her with those heartbreaking golden eyes, terrified, hopeless, already resigned to being abandoned again. Everyone left me, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind. Kahlan knelt in the snow, her cloak spreading around her as she pulled it off and wrapped it around his shaking body. I'm not everyone. She lifted him, so light, too light, already weakened by cold and fear, and felt him burrow against her chest like he'd been waiting his whole short life for someone to finally choose him. Behind them, Cara stood watching with her fists clenched. Zedd shook his head slowly, already composing the report he'd give to Rahl, and somewhere ahead, through 10 miles of brutal winter, lay the possibility of safety, or the certainty of dying together in the attempt. Kahlan turned her back on everything she'd ever known and started walking into the storm. Some choices, she realized, weren't really choices at all. They were just moments when you finally stopped pretending you had any option but to do the right thing. The first mile was manageable. Kahlan's legs protested. Richard's weight felt heavier than physics suggested it should, but she could do this. She'd carried supply packs this heavy before. She just had to keep moving. The second mile was when her body started screaming. Richard grew heavier with each step. Or maybe she grew weaker. It was hard to tell the difference when every muscle felt like it was tearing. The snow was knee-deep in places, waist-deep in others where drifts had formed, and the wind hit like physical blows that threatened to knock her sideways. Stay awake, she told Richard, feeling him go limp against her chest. I need you to stay awake, okay? Tired, he mumbled, his small voice muffled by her fur. I know, but if you sleep in the cold, you might not wake up. So I'm going to tell you a story, and you have to listen. Deal? A tiny nod against her chest. There was once a wolf named Marana, Kahlan began, her breath fogging in the frigid air as she pushed forward through another drift. She was small, like you. Everyone said she was too weak to survive. But Marana didn't believe them. She learned to hunt in ways other wolves hadn't thought of, using her size to slip into places bigger wolves couldn't reach, tracking prey by listening instead of chasing. Did she live? Richard's voice was drowsy. She thrived, became the best tracker in her pack, taught everyone that different doesn't mean less, just means you have to be creative. I like that story. Good. I've got about 10 miles worth of them, so get comfortable. The third mile brought the first real crisis. Kahlan's boot, worn thin from years of use because Omega's got equipment last, caught on a hidden root beneath the snow. She went down hard, twisting to take the impact on her shoulder so Richard wouldn't hit the ground. Pain exploded through her joint, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she'd dislocated it. Richard cried out as his twisted leg jarred against her body. I'm sorry, Kahlan gasped, checking him over with hands that were starting to lose feeling. His bad leg was swelling, the skin hot to touch, even in the freezing cold, the injury worsening from the jostling and stress. She dug through her medical bag with numb fingers, pulling out the few supplies she'd grabbed in her hasty departure. Willow bark for pain, comfrey for inflammation, clean cloth for a makeshift splint using 2 straight sticks she found under the snow. "This is going to hurt," she warned, and then hated herself for the understatement when Richard's scream cut through the storm. But the leg was stabilized at least. Better than nothing. They kept moving. Mile 4 brought predators. She heard them before she saw them, the low growls of a fox pack that had learned desperate winters made even wolves vulnerable. Kahlan had no weapons except her medical kit and her refusal to let anything else die today. She snarled with everything she had, making herself bigger, more threatening, summoning an aggression she'd spent her whole life suppressing. The foxes circled once, twice, then melted back into the white. "You scared them," Richard whispered, something like awe in his voice. "I scared myself," Kahlan admitted. "Turns out Omegas can be terrifying when properly motivated." "Motivated by what?" "By you. By not letting anything happen to you." Mile 5 was when Kahlan's vision started going dark at the edges. Hypothermia, exhaustion, dehydration. Her body was shutting down in stages, prioritizing core functions and abandoning everything else. Her fingers were blue, her feet had stopped hurting, which meant the frostbite was advancing, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt her face. "Tell me another story," Richard murmured. So she did, even though forming words felt like swimming through mud. Stories about wolves who'd shown mercy when the world demanded cruelty. About underdogs who'd survived through cleverness and compassion. About families built by choice instead of blood. "Ka?" Richard's voice was getting weaker, his words slurring. He couldn't manage her full name anymore, just the first syllable that came out like an exhaled breath. "Right here, sweetheart. Still got you. Promise you won't leave me?" "Never. You're stuck with me now." "Good." Pause. "I like being stuck with you." Something in Kahlan's chest cracked open at that. This tiny, broken pup who'd been abandoned by everyone, finding safety in the arms of someone barely surviving herself. Mile 6 was when Kahlan's legs finally gave out. She went down in the snow, managed to roll so Richard landed on top of her instead of underneath, and for a long moment simply couldn't make her body move. Everything hurt. Everything was cold. Everything in her screamed to just rest, just for a minute, just close her eyes, and "Ka?" She felt Richard shift on her chest, felt him struggle despite his splinted leg, heard his small grunt of pain as he tried to drag himself forward using his front legs. "Richard, what are you—" "Keep going," he whimpered, pulling himself inch by agonizing inch through the snow ahead of her, his twisted leg dragging behind him. "We have to. You said we have to." He was trying to crawl forward. This 5-year-old pup with a shattered leg, and hypothermia was trying to keep going because she'd told him they couldn't stop. He was fighting to survive for her. Kahlan's eyes burned with tears that froze on her cheeks. She forced herself up, every muscle shrieking, every nerve ending screaming, and stumbled forward to scoop Richard back into her arms. "I've got you," she said, her voice raw. "I've got you, baby. You don't have to be strong right now. That's my job." Richard burrowed against her chest, his small body trembling. "Together?" "Together," Kahlan agreed, and kept walking into the white. 4 more miles to go. She could do this. She had to do this. Because somewhere along this frozen hell, Richard had stopped being a cause and become her child, and mothers didn't quit. Not even when everything in them wanted to. Kahlan was helping Richard practice walking with his new brace when the Borderland patrol brought Cara in. The warrior looked exactly as she had 2 months ago, battle-scarred, muscular, radiating controlled violence. But there was something different in her eyes, something tired. "Alpha Gareth wants you in his office," the patrol leader said quietly to Kahlan. "Now." Richard's small hand gripped hers tighter. "Ka, it's okay. Stay with the healer. I'll be right back." But she knew, walking toward Gareth's office with her heart hammering, that this wasn't okay. Cara being here meant Rahl knew where they were, meant he wanted something, meant their safety had always been temporary. Cara stood in front of Gareth's desk like a soldier reporting for duty, her posture rigid. She didn't look at Kahlan when she entered, just kept her eyes fixed on the Alpha. "State your business," Gareth said, his voice cold. "I'm here to retrieve stolen property belonging to Alpha Rahl." Cara's words came out mechanical, rehearsed. The Omega Kahlan, she left Pack territory without permission, violating her oath of service. She left to save a child's life. She left with Pack resources, medical supplies, territory knowledge that belonged to Rahl. Omegas don't have the right to make unilateral decisions about Pack property. "I'm not property," Kahlan said quietly. Cara flinched but didn't look at her. "Pack law says otherwise." "Your Pack law, not mine." Gareth leaned back in his chair. "And even if I accepted that interpretation, which I don't, Kahlan requested sanctuary here. She's under my protection now." "Then you're harboring a fugitive. That's grounds for territorial conflict." "You threatening war over an Omega who saved a disabled pup?" "I'm delivering Alpha Rahl's message." Cara's jaw was tight. "Return her within 3 days or face consequences." "Tell Rahl he can shove his consequences." "You knew." Kahlan's voice cut through the tension. "You walked past Richard. You saw him dying, and you kept walking." Cara's eyes finally met hers, and there was such raw pain there that Kahlan almost stepped back. "I had orders." So did his parents. So did Zedd. Everyone had orders. Everyone followed them. And a 5-year-old was going to freeze to death because no one would question whether the orders were right. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." Kahlan moved closer, forcing Cara to hold her gaze. "You're a warrior. You're strong, trained, respected. If anyone could have challenged Rahl, it was you. But instead you chose safety over morality. And you've been making that choice for how long? 20 years? Cara's expression cracked. 23. I've been Rahl's enforcer for 23 years. I've watched 17 disabled pups die. 12 elderly wolves exiled when they couldn't contribute anymore. 6 Omegas punished for showing excessive compassion. And yes, I knew it was wrong. I've always known. Then why? Because I'm a coward. The words burst out of Cara like a wound finally draining. Because every time I thought about standing up to him, I remembered what happened to the last wolf who questioned his authority. Because I told myself that surviving to fight another day was better than dying for nothing. Because it's easy to be brave when you're Omega and have nothing left to lose. Harder when you have rank, status, a future that disobedience would destroy. The room was silent except for Cara's ragged breathing. I can't be like you, she said finally, her voice breaking. I can't carry pups through blizzards, or tell alphas they're wrong, or sacrifice everything for principle. I don't have that kind of courage. "Then what are you doing here?" Gareth asked. Cara was quiet for a long moment. Then she straightened, her expression hardening back into that warrior mask. "I'm here to report that I tracked Kahlan and the pup to the eastern forest. Found signs of a struggle, blood in the snow, torn fabric. Followed the trail to a ravine where the storm had caused an avalanche. Both bodies were buried, unrecoverable. Kahlan's breath caught. Cara, they died in the storm, just like nature intended. Tragic, but inevitable." Cara's eyes met Kahlan's, and there was something fierce in them now. "That's what I'm telling Rahl. That's what goes in the official report. As far as my alpha knows, his fugitive Omega and the defective pup are dead." "He'll send others to verify," Gareth started. "He'll send me, and I'll verify my own report." Cara turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I can't be brave like you, Kahlan. I can't stand up to him openly or change the system from inside. But I can lie. I can look Rahl in the eye and tell him you're dead and make him believe it." "Why?" Kahlan whispered. "Why risk this?" "Because I'm tired of watching children die. Because in 23 years of following orders, you're the first wolf who made me ashamed of my obedience." Cara's voice was rough. "Because maybe if I can't save them, I can at least stop hunting the ones who do." She left without another word, her footsteps fading down the hall. Gareth let out a slow breath. Well, that was unexpected. Kahlan sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Cara, brutal, loyal, unquestioning Cara, had just committed treason. Had chosen to protect them by lying to the Alpha she'd served for over 2 decades. The first crack in Rahl's control, small, maybe. But cracks had a way of spreading. The news came with Cara, who arrived at a dead run just after dawn, her fur matted with sweat despite the winter cold. "He knows," she gasped, collapsing in Gareth's office. "Rahl knows I lied. A traveling merchant mentioned the crippled pup sanctuary in the Borderlands. Rahl put it together." Kahlan's blood ran cold. What's he going to do? What he always does when his authority is challenged. Cara's eyes were haunted. He's bringing 50 warriors. Plans to raid at the new moon, 3 days from now. Says he's going to kill every disabled wolf in the sanctuary and burn the center to the ground. Send a message that mercy is weakness, and weakness won't be tolerated. The room went silent, except for Cara's ragged breathing. "He's not just coming for you anymore, Kahlan. He's coming for all of them. Every wolf who came here believing they deserved to live. He's going to execute them as examples." Richard, who'd been practicing bandaging techniques in the corner, went very still. "He's coming to kill us because we're alive?" "Because you're proof his philosophy is wrong," Zedd said quietly from the doorway. He'd been staying at the sanctuary for months now, working in the healing center, trying to atone. If disabled wolves can thrive, if outcasts can build community, if mercy creates strength instead of weakness, everything Rahl built his power on collapses. Gareth's expression was grim. 50 warriors. That's nearly his entire fighting force. He's committed to this. "Can we evacuate?" one of the Borderland advisors asked. "Get the vulnerable wolves out before—" "Where?" Kahlan interrupted. "Where exactly do we evacuate disabled wolves in the middle of winter? Who else will take them in?" "We run now. We're just delaying the inevitable. Rahl will hunt them down pack by pack, territory by territory, until he's eliminated every wolf who dared to believe they had worth." So what's the alternative? We fight? The advisor looked around at the wolves gathered. Healers, elderly wolves, disabled refugees. Against 50 of Rahl's best warriors? That's suicide. That's standing our ground, Kahlan said fiercely. That's saying we have the right to exist and we're not running anymore. Easy for you to say, you're not. The advisor stopped himself, but the damage was done. Not what? Not disabled? Not vulnerable? Kahlan's voice was sharp. I'm Omega. I'm the lowest rank in traditional pack structure. I'm exactly what Rahl thinks should be eliminated, and I'm done apologizing for surviving. Gareth held up a hand for silence. We need a strategy. Cara, what's Rahl planning? Direct assault at dawn. He'll come through the main pass with overwhelming force, expecting token resistance before we surrender or flee. He's counting on fear. Then we don't fight the way he expects, Zedd said slowly. Rahl trains his warriors for dominance fights, direct confrontation, physical superiority, brute strength. But we have advantages he doesn't. Like what? The advisor scoffed. Hope and good intentions? Like terrain knowledge, Kahlan said, understanding flooding through her. Like cooperation instead of hierarchy. Like wolves who've learned to adapt and improvise because their survival depended on it. Richard limped forward, his brace clicking softly. Like knowing that strength isn't just fighting, it's strategy. It's working together. It's using what you have instead of wishing for what you don't. The pup's right, Cara said. Rahl's warriors are trained to follow orders, not think independently. They're powerful, but predictable. If we can disrupt their formation, separate them, force them into terrain where their size and strength become disadvantages, the narrow passages through the eastern rocks, Gareth said, catching on, the ice fields where lighter wolves have better traction, the forest where visibility matters more than raw power. We make them fight on our terms, not theirs. Plans took shape through the day. Borderland warriors would form the primary defense, but the sanctuary wolves insisted on helping. Disabled wolves setting traps their bodies were uniquely suited to construct. Elderly wolves using decades of experience to predict enemy movements. Even the youngest pups preparing escape routes and safe zones. It wasn't traditional warfare. It was guerrilla tactics, environmental manipulation, coordinated defense that treated every wolf's contribution as valuable regardless of physical ability. That evening, Kahlan found Gareth standing at the sanctuary entrance, staring toward the pass where Rahl would come. Are you sure they're worth dying for? He asked quietly. Not Richard. Specifically, all of them. Every disabled wolf, every outcast, every refugee who came here broken. You could take Richard and disappear. Find some other territory. Live quietly. Kahlan thought about that first night in the blizzard, about the choice she'd made to carry one pup through impossible conditions, about how that choice had rippled outward, creating this sanctuary, this community, this fragile proof that mercy could be stronger than cruelty. I already decided they were worth dying for, she said. That night in the snow, when I picked up Richard, every step of those 10 miles, every time I refused to leave him behind. She turned to face Gareth, her expression fierce. But I'm not deciding they're worth dying for anymore. I'm deciding they're worth fighting for, worth standing my ground for, worth telling Rahl that he doesn't get to determine who deserves to exist. That's not an answer. Yes, it is, because if we run, we accept his premise, that we only deserve life if we can prove our worth to people who've already decided we're worthless. If we fight, we claim our right to exist just as we are. We say our lives have value because we're alive, not because we're useful. Gareth was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, something fierce and proud in his expression. You know, when you first arrived half dead and demanding sanctuary, I thought you were just a desperate Omega with more courage than sense. And now? Now I think you might be the most dangerous wolf I've ever met. The kind who doesn't just survive the system, she dismantles it. 3 days until Rahl arrived. 3 days to prepare for a battle that would determine whether mercy was weakness or the strongest revolution of all. Kahlan looked at the sanctuary, at Richard teaching a new arrival how to manage pain, at Zedd documenting strategies, at disabled wolves working alongside warriors to build defenses that used brain over brawn. They weren't going to run. They were going to fight for their right to exist. And they were going to win. They came at dawn, just as Cara predicted. 50 warriors moving through the pass like a dark tide, Rahl at their center, massive, confident, expecting easy victory over wolves he'd already decided were worthless. The Borderland defenders were positioned exactly where they needed to be. Not in a traditional line formation that would let Rahl's superior numbers overwhelm them, but scattered through the terrain, hidden in narrow passages, positioned on ice fields, waiting in the forest where visibility mattered more than size. Remember, Gareth called to his wolves, we're not trying to beat them in straight combat, we're making them fight our way. Kahlan stood with the sanctuary's evacuation team, helping load the youngest pups and most vulnerable wolves onto sleds that would take them deep into safe territory. Richard was supposed to be on one of those sleds. I can help, he insisted, his golden eyes fierce. I know, healing. People are going to get hurt, which is why you need to survive to treat them after. Kahlan gripped his shoulders. Please, Richard, I can't fight if I'm worried about you. You fought while carrying me through a blizzard. That was different. No, it wasn't. You taught me that everyone has value. That includes me, even in battle, especially in battle. Before she could respond, the first clash of combat echoed through the pass. Get on the sled, Kahlan ordered, then ran toward the fighting. The battle was chaos. Rahl's warriors charged with overwhelming force, expecting the Borderland wolves to break and scatter. Instead, they hit prepared defenses, traps built by disabled wolves who understood leverage and angles better than traditional warriors, narrow passages where size became a disadvantage, ice fields where lighter wolves had traction advantages. Kahlan saw a massive warrior slip on ice and get swarmed by 3 smaller Borderland fighters. Saw another get caught in a rope trap designed by a 3-legged wolf who understood balance intuitively. Saw Rahl's perfect formations break apart as the terrain forced them into isolated skirmishes instead of unified assault. But it wasn't enough. Rahl had numbers, training, and the kind of ruthless efficiency that came from years of crushing dissent. The Borderland defenders were being pushed back, taking losses they couldn't afford. Then Cara made her choice. She was fighting at Rahl's right flank, his most trusted position, when she suddenly turned and slammed into one of his warriors instead, taking him down hard. The Eastern Ledge, she shouted to the Borderland wolves. He's got reinforcements coming through the Eastern Ledge. Rahl's head snapped toward her, betrayal and rage flooding his expression. Traitor! 23 years too late, Cara snarled back, positioning herself between Rahl and a group of sanctuary wolves. But better late than never. The defection sent shockwaves through Rahl's forces. If Cara, loyal, brutal, unquestioning Cara, had turned against him, what did that mean? Wolves hesitated, questioned, and in battle, hesitation was fatal. Gareth's forces pressed the advantage, redirecting to cut off the eastern reinforcements. The battle shifted, balanced on a knife's edge. That's when Zedd appeared on the ridge above the pass, his old body moving with surprising speed toward a specific overhang, heavy with snow and ice. Ancient wolf knowledge, he muttered, positioning himself precisely. Snow weight, ice formation, resonance frequencies. Let's see if I remember this correctly. He howled, not a normal howl, but something primal, pitched at exactly the right frequency. The snow on the overhang shivered, shifted, and then collapsed in a roaring avalanche that swept through Rahl's rear guard, cutting off their retreat and trapping half his forces in the pass. Rahl stood in the center of the chaos, his gray eyes finding Kahlan across the battlefield. Recognition, rage, and something like disbelief flickered across his face. You, he snarled, the Omega who should have learned her place. You taught me Omegas are weak, Kahlan said, walking toward him with blood on her fur and fire in her eyes. Watch what the weak can do. He charged, all raw power and dominance, the way alpha wolves had fought for generations. Kahlan didn't meet his charge. She dodged, rolled, used his momentum against him to send him crashing into rocks. When he recovered and came at her again, she led him onto ice where his weight worked against him. Stand and fight, Rahl roared. Why? So you can win the only way you know how? Kahlan circled him, keeping terrain advantages. I'm not playing your game anymore, not fighting by your rules, not accepting your definition of strength, she signaled. 3 Borderland wolves closed in from different angles, coordinated, cooperative, working together instead of seeking individual glory. Rahl tried to fight them all and couldn't. Too many directions, too many tactics he'd never trained for. He went down hard, pinned by wolves who individually he could have destroyed, but together were unstoppable. You can't win, Rahl gasped. Strength always triumphs. Nature demands it. Nature demands adaptation, Kahlan said coldly, and you're about to learn what that means. A commotion at the sanctuary entrance made everyone turn. Richard was limping through the battlefield, his medical bag slung across his small body, heading straight for the wounded. Richard, no, Kahlan started, but he was already kneeling beside a fallen Borderland warrior, his small paws working with practiced efficiency to stop bleeding, to stabilize. Then he moved to the next wounded wolf, one of Rahl's warriors who'd been trapped by the avalanche. What are you doing? The warrior gasped, trying to push him away. I'm your enemy. You're hurt, Richard said simply, applying pressure to a wound. That makes you my patient. Mom taught me that we don't choose who deserves healing. We just heal. Other sanctuary wolves followed his example, moving through the battlefield treating wounded from both sides. Disabled wolves who'd been declared useless, demonstrating their value by saving lives. Elderly healers using decades of knowledge to prevent deaths. Outcasts proving they had more to offer than the packs who'd rejected them. Rahl watched it all from where he lay pinned, something breaking behind his eyes, the realization that everything he'd built his identity on was crumbling. "What are you going to do?" he asked finally. "Kill me? Make me a martyr?" "No," Kahlan said. "We're going to exile you. Send you out alone into the territories with nothing but what you can carry. Let you experience what you inflicted on so many others." "That's mercy," Cara finished, standing over him with blood on her muzzle. "Genuine mercy, which you never understood. You get to live, Rahl. You just don't get to hurt anyone else ever again." They stripped him of his authority, his territory, his pack, sent him walking into the winter alone, not to die, but to survive the way outcasts had to survive. To learn humility the hardest way possible. His warriors, seeing their alpha defeated and exiled, faced a choice. Some left with him, clinging to the old ways. But others, tired of cruelty, exhausted by violence, questioning beliefs they'd never been allowed to question, asked for sanctuary. The battle ended not with total victory, but with transformation. With wolves on both sides realizing there were other ways to measure strength, other definitions of worth, other possibilities than the ones they'd been taught. And in the center of it all, Richard worked on saving lives, his twisted leg in its brace, his small body moving between wounded warriors, regardless of which side they'd fought on. "See," he said to a Rahl warrior he was treating, "disabled doesn't mean useless. It just means different, and different can save your life." Kahlan watched him, this pup she'd carried through a blizzard, who'd grown into something extraordinary, not despite his disability, but including it, and understood that they hadn't just won a battle. They'd won the right to exist exactly as they were, and that was worth every frozen step. 5 years changed the world, or at least their corner of it. Richard was 11 now, tall for his age despite early malnourishment, his pale fur gleaming with health. The brace had been replaced twice as he grew, each iteration more sophisticated than the last, designed by craftsmen who treated his input as valuable expertise rather than accommodation. He moved with confidence through the sanctuary, not despite his twisted leg, but including it, the slight hitch in his gait as much a part of him as his golden eyes or his gift for healing. Kahlan watched him lead a training session for junior healers, his voice steady and sure as he demonstrated proper, wound care. Remember, pain management isn't just about stopping hurt. It's about understanding what the body's trying to tell you and working with it, not against it. The students, a mix of able-bodied and disabled wolves from 3 different packs, listened with the kind of attention that came from genuine respect, not obligation. When had that happened? When had disabled wolves gone from outcasts to teachers, from burdens to valued community members? Slowly, Kahlan realized. One choice at a time, one rescued wolf at a time, one pack delegation at a time, coming to learn how the Borderlands had made impossible work. The sanctuary had expanded far beyond that initial healing center. Now it was a full community. Workshops where disabled wolves designed adaptive equipment for others. Schools where different learning styles were celebrated rather than punished. Councils where Omegas spoke with the same authority as Alphas, because rank meant contribution, not dominance. Gareth had worked with Kahlan to rewrite Borderland law from the ground up. Worth based on character and contribution, not physical ability or designation. Rights that couldn't be stripped away just because someone was born different. Protection for the vulnerable that didn't require them to prove they deserved protection. Revolutionary, visiting Alphas called it. Some with admiration, others with skepticism. Basic decency, Kahlan always replied. The real shock was how many other packs started asking questions. Young wolves who'd grown up watching disabled packmates exiled, who'd been told their compassion was weakness, who'd followed orders without questioning whether those orders were right. They came to the Borderlands and saw something different, saw disabled wolves thriving, saw cooperation creating strength that dominance never could, saw mercy building community instead of destroying it. And they went home with dangerous ideas about how things could change. Cara had become the sanctuary's ambassador, traveling between territories, teaching packs how to support disabled members. It was perfect karmic irony. The enforcer who'd spent 23 years upholding cruelty now spent her days dismantling it. She was good at it too, her blunt warrior's honesty cutting through political doublespeak to the truth beneath. Your alpha says accommodating disabled wolves is too expensive, she'd told one pack council bluntly. What he means is he's too lazy to reorganize systems that weren't working anyway. Here's how we did it with half your resources. Some packs changed, others clung to tradition. But each delegation that visited, each young wolf that saw alternatives, was another crack in foundations that had seemed unshakable. Zedd had found his redemption in documentation. He'd taken that journal of names, all the wolves Rahl had killed or exiled, and built around it a comprehensive history of how weakness narratives had damaged entire pack societies. How eliminating disabled wolves meant losing their unique perspectives and problem-solving abilities. How mercy-killing elderly wolves meant losing generational knowledge. How punishing compassion created cultures of cruelty that hurt everyone, not just the vulnerable. The old ways weren't ancient wisdom, he wrote in his introduction. They were recent trauma calcified into tradition. Real wisdom means adapting, learning, choosing compassion over convenient cruelty. The book circulated through territories like wildfire, giving wolves language for feelings they'd suppressed for years. Richard had read it cover to cover, then told Zedd quietly, "Thank you for writing down their names, for making sure they're remembered." "It's the least I could do," Zedd had replied, his voice rough, "though it doesn't make up for not saving them." "No," Richard agreed, "but it might save the ones who come after." Kahlan found herself watching Richard more and more these days, marveling at who he'd become. He was training as both healer and diplomat, teaching visiting wolves his mother's core lesson. That worth isn't measured by physical ability, but by character, choices, and how you treat others. He was good at it, patient with skeptics, firm with bullies, compassionate with wolves still learning to unpack their own internalized prejudices. He'd inherited Kahlan's refusal to accept injustice and combined it with a diplomatic grace she'd never possessed. "You're going to change the world," she'd told him once. "You already did," he'd replied. "I'm just helping it spread." The day the message came about another abandoned pup, Kahlan felt time fold back on itself. A young wolf found at the eastern border, left in the snow, birth defect making one eye clouded and useless. Maybe 5 years old, parents unknown, pack unknown, just another defective wolf someone had decided didn't deserve to exist. "I'll go," Richard said immediately, already gathering medical supplies. "We'll go," Kahlan corrected. "Together." They found her where the patrol had left her, a small gray pup with one golden eye and one milky white, shivering in the snow, waiting for someone to decide whether she was worth saving. Richard knelt beside her, his braced legs settling into snow with practiced ease. "Hey there. My name's Richard. What's yours?" Lyra, the pup whispered. Are you here to take me away? We're here to take you home, Kahlan said gently, to a place where being different doesn't mean being less. Lyra's good eye fixed on Richard's brace. What's wrong with your leg? Nothing's wrong with it. It just works differently than most legs. Richard smiled. Just like your eye works differently. That doesn't make us broken. It makes us interesting. My pack said I was broken. Your pack was wrong. Kahlan wrapped her cloak around Lyra's small body, a different cloak than the one she'd given Richard 5 years ago, but the gesture was identical. And we're going to spend as long as it takes proving that to you. They carried Lyra back together, Richard walking alongside Kahlan, both of them supporting the small pup who'd been thrown away. And watching Richard talk softly to Lyra about the sanctuary, about all the different kinds of wolves who lived there, about how she'd find her place and her purpose, Kahlan finally understood what she'd actually accomplished. She hadn't just saved one life that night in the blizzard. She'd changed what life could mean, what worth could mean, what strength could look like when it wasn't measured by dominance and violence. Richard had grown from victim to survivor, to symbol to teacher. And now he was saving the next abandoned pup, carrying forward the mercy she'd shown him, multiplying it outward in ways she couldn't have imagined. That evening, she stood at the sanctuary entrance, watching Richard teach Lyra about her new home, showing her the adaptive equipment workshop, introducing her to other wolves with visual differences, making her laugh despite her fear. Cara joined her, following her gaze. You did good, Omega. We did good, Kahlan corrected. All of us. Every wolf who chose mercy when cruelty was easier. It's spreading, you know. 3 more packs have requested delegations this month. Young wolves asking questions, challenging their alphas, demanding change. Cara's smile was fierce. You started a revolution by refusing to let one pup die. Mercy is dangerous, Kahlan said softly, echoing words she'd thought 5 years ago in a different snow, facing a different choice. The most dangerous thing, Cara agreed. It threatens every system built on cruelty, terrifies everyone invested in hierarchies that require someone to be disposable. Kahlan watched Richard, confident, compassionate, whole in ways that had nothing to do with his leg, guiding another lost pup toward safety. Watched Lyra's tentative smile, her growing hope, her dawning realization that maybe she did deserve to exist after all. But some dangers are worth it, Kahlan finished, worth carrying through blizzards, worth fighting wars over, worth spending your life defending. 10 miles through snow, Cara said quietly. 10 years building sanctuary, Zedd added, joining them. Forever, if that's what it takes, Richard called over, having clearly been eavesdropping. He grinned at Kahlan with that brilliant smile that still made her throat tight. Right, Mom? Right, Kahlan agreed, her voice rough with emotion. Forever. In the snow-deep forest all those years ago, Kahlan had learned that mercy was the most dangerous thing an Omega could offer. But she'd also learned that some dangers were worth carrying, 10 miles, 10 years, or forever. That saving one life could save hundreds more. That refusing to abandon the vulnerable was how you transformed the world. She'd carried Richard through a blizzard thinking she was just saving one disabled pup. She'd actually been carrying the future,